Alrighty, I'm pleased to be joined by returning guest Brendan Abban. How's it going, Brendan?
I'm good, man. How are you doing today?
It's been pretty good. Again, it's been a while since you came on last, but again, thanks for coming on. We're both our schedules kind of clashed there for a sec, but we're
Yeah.
finally on. So how's it going?
Good, man. I'm happy because we're getting into honestly the best time of the year if you're an NBA fan, when the games really start to matter and stuff. So it's honestly, I couldn't be doing better right now.
Yeah, let's start talking about the NBA playoffs. Of course, it's that magical time of the year, right? Again, as you mentioned, the best time for the NBA. So let's first start talking about, the play-in games that happened. I think it was Tuesday, the first game between the Nets and the Cavs. Actually, before we talk about that, you want to talk more about your podcast and your YouTube channel and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I do host my own podcast and YouTube channel. It's KBR Sports. Excuse me. And on there, I talk about pretty much a good range of sports topics, ranging from the NFL, NBA, and MLB, and so on, as well as UFC, and bring on different guests associated with the industry and so on to talk about those different topics. And sometimes we just end up talking, shooting the crap about whatever else comes up. You might talk about video games at times, who knows? But it's just a podcast I like to have fun on. So yeah, I definitely enjoy doing my own stuff as well.
Yeah, again, the last time you came on, we had a lot of views and stuff like that, so it was pretty good. And of course, I think it was during the finals the last time you came on. But yeah, again, the NFL, NBA, MLB, that's kind of our podcast through the sports town. So again, thanks again for coming on. But let's start talking about the playoffs again. As I just mentioned, the Nets and Cavs played on Tuesday night. They were the teams that kicked off, and we'll talk about the Timberwolves and Clippers in a sec here. But the Nets, of course, they had that huge lead. They almost let it go there for a sec, but they ended up winning. I think the
Yeah.
Cavs' lack of experience kind of hurts them at times. But what did you think about that game overall?
I think it was a game that Brooklyn was in control of for the most part. I think it was one of those things where you could just tell Kyrie and KD were just locked in from an offensive standpoint, and they were able just to really control the game throughout most of it. Like you noted, towards the end of the game, the Cavs made a little run to try and cut back into that lead.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was more so Brooklyn just kind of being like, okay, we got this game. Let's go on to the next one. Like they were already seeing the Celtics like midway through the fourth quarter. So I think that they essentially took their foot off the gas pedal. So that kind of resulted in that run the Cavs went on to end the game. But this is what Brooklyn has been. What we saw in that game, that potent offense, that tandem, even without James Harden or without Ben Simmons at this juncture in time, you're looking at that tandem, and everybody knows that one thing they can do is put the ball in the basket. But now, as they approach the matchup against the Celtics, you just wonder, well, what is that defense going to look like? Because the Celtics also have a tandem that can put the ball in the basket as well.
Yeah, the Celtics, I mean, they have caught fire after that All-Star break. I think they were like the seventh or eighth seed. They were barely in the playoffs there for a
Yeah,
sec. And all of a sudden now they're the second best team in the East. And of course, the East is stacked this year, unlike the West. It's pretty much the Suns and that's it. But
yeah.
the Grizzlies for a while there, the Warriors were kind of threatening them, and now the Grizzlies are, but I think the Grizzlies just
So
aren't good.
you
They're
don't
not
think
better than the Suns in my opinion, but
so? Wait, you don't think the Western Conference is tough this year?
the Western Conference is normally really tough, but this year it's
Yeah.
not as tough as it's
Wow.
normally been. But I think it's
Wow.
yeah, I think it's mostly because Phoenix is just so good this year compared to
Mhm.
every other team. And of course the Lakers too, with all their injuries they had problems with, even the Clippers
Yeah.
for a while there. But like the West is just not quite as fun this year as it normally is because the Suns just are dominating every team pretty
Yeah.
much. But actually, we'll talk about the West a little bit later, but that Nets squad, as you just mentioned, they're one of the best duos with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And of course, Durant's one of the better players in the world, really. And
Yeah.
then you got Kyrie Irving, a very not necessarily underrated, but he only played part-time half the time this year. And when
Yeah.
he's actually healthy and when he's all good, I mean, he's almost impossible to stop. But
Yeah.
as you mentioned, there's a chance that Ben Simmons could play. Do you think Ben Simmons will play in this next series versus the Celtics?
I think at least from what it sounds like, that's what the reports are saying. That's what he's
Mhm.
targeting. I am very curious to see what the version of Ben Simmons we're going to get because I look, I played basketball. I played for a long time, and I will definitely tell you when you have a back injury and you are out of the game for a while and you're not conditioning to just come back and play, let alone NBA basketball at a high level in the playoffs and you're just going to walk in and be expected to play 20, 30 minutes. Yeah, that's tough, man. I genuinely am like, I don't know how, especially if it's your lower back and your body's not fit to necessarily endure those type of minutes. Granted, look, he's an athletic freak. Maybe he can do it, but I just know that unless he's been conditioning and maybe we're just the injury's been overblown to this point, which raises questions in and of itself. But if that's not the scenario, then I just don't see how he's about to come out and really impact the game and the way Ben Simmons can and has in the past.
And if Ben Simmons does play for the Nets this series when they take on the Celtics, and if he actually starts, which I'm not sure he'll be in the starting lineup right away, but what kind of lineup do you think the Nets will go with? Because they can go with so many different lineups. And of course, you have Kyrie at the 1, Durant either at the 3 or 4, depending on where Simmons wants to play. And then I think you have Andre Drummond at the 5.
Yeah.
How do you think they would do that lineup? Do you think they'd put Simmons at the 3, 4? I mean, where do you think they'd put him at?
I think honestly, if you have Ben Simmons on your team and he's able to fully perform in his full capacity, I think you put Ben Simmons at the 4. Honestly, I think because that lightens Kevin Durant's load in terms of having to guard a bigger body. Because most 4s, I mean, granted, the NBA is such a free-flowing positional game at this point. Like a 4 is just merely a number at this point. Honestly,
yeah.
you could be a 4 and be a 3 at the same time. So it really ranges, but I think that I could see him playing the 4, especially because normally you would have a 4 or 5, normally closer around the basket, which is where Ben Simmons naturally would probably operate. But I think if you want to go small, you probably put him at the 4 or whatever, and then you let him be your playmaker on the other end if you don't want that to be Kyrie. And I think then if you want to implement those really small lineups, you could put Ben Simmons at the 5 or whatever the case might be. I mean, we've seen teams like Golden State is the greatest example of it, where you go small and you have a guy like Draymond at your 5, and Ben Simmons is a tall enough. I mean, he's 6'10", and he's tall enough, he's strong enough to be able to play that 5 position and be versatile to defend the rim, be able to guard guys down there. So that Ben Simmons card that they have is very, very interesting to see how they could utilize it in the playoffs.
Yeah, you mentioned too, putting Ben Simmons at the 5, that'd be a really good lineup. And in my opinion, Durant is not really a 4, he's more of a 3. But again, as you mentioned, the NBA is so flowing now, and it's basically become positionless basketball, right? Where you can just have the best 5 players on your lineup, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, so I think Simmons at the 5 would actually make a lot of sense, because you could either put Durant at the 3 or 4, then Kyrie Irving, of course, at the 1, and then you can kind of depend on how you want it or how Steve Nash wants it.
Yeah.
But that would be.
I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to say this before I even forget it. Imagine a lineup: Kyrie Irving, Seth Curry, Kevin Durant, whoever you want to put Ben Simmons at the 4, Claxton or whomever. Like, just imagine the lineups you could. Bruce Brown at the 3, Kevin Durant at the 4, Ben Simmons at the 5. The amount of shooting and playmaking on that, like, imagine if somebody wants to double off of Ben Simmons, he's just surrounded with shooters all over the place. So even if you want to implement what they used to do to Philly, because the reason why it worked against Philly has never once had the amount of shooting on the court that Brooklyn can now put out there and surround Ben Simmons with, especially because Ben Simmons always had to play with Joel Embiid. So you imagine that variation of that right now, dude, that's sheesh. That's crazy.
That's going to be really scary, right? And that's why I'm so excited for that matchup with the Celtics, 2 teams that are pretty hot right now. And the Nets are kind of hot, but like that's probably going to go into 7 in my opinion, I think. But like I said, yeah, the Nets, I mean, there's a good chance they could run to the conference finals. Not sure they're going to, but like I said, a healthy Kevin Durant, a healthy Ben Simmons, which again, we don't know when yet. And then of course, Kyrie Irving now can be a full-time player. So I don't know, that Nets team, as you mentioned, it's going to be scary. So
there's one thing I do want to say about that Nets scenario, because the thing is, it can be really scary, right? But the problem is they haven't played together, right? Like they have not. Ben Simmons hasn't played 1 minute, at least to our knowledge, even within practice with these guys. So you don't know everybody's tendencies. You don't know where everybody likes the ball. You don't know how everybody likes to move without the ball. And all those things are naturally what comes to basketball. The reason why Golden State works so well with each other is because all those guys, like Draymond, can close his eyes and he could bring the ball up court. He knows where Steph is going to be, right? And that's just naturally chemistry you get through playing a season together. And when you don't have that and you're just trying to kind of makeshift it with your talent, yeah, you can make things happen with your talent naturally because you're just so good. but sometimes you're going to see that chemistry rear its head in different situations. And it's going to be interesting to see how Steve Nash implements those lineups, because guys got to get comfortable with one another to really maximize how they're able to play with each other.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing too, that, like I said, Golden State for such a long time, and there's so much good chemistry, especially when you had like guys like Draymond Green back in the day when they had Kevin Durant, back in the day when, of course, Klay Thompson was fully healthy, and of course Steph Curry. But yeah, that's chemistry is very underrated. No one really talks much about it, but it's so important, especially, and just look at what the Spurs did back in the day. They had so much chemistry with Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. Eventually Kawhi Leonard came into the plan, but I mean, it was just, like I said, chemistry is huge.
Yeah.
Is there, let's go to the other play-in game between the Timberwolves and Clippers. Of course, the Timberwolves come from behind without Karl-Anthony Towns, which I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
They celebrated. They were pretty happy to be in the postseason. Not sure exactly I agree with how they did it, but still, I mean, let's give credit to the Timberwolves, right? Winning without Karl-Anthony Towns, which is good because he's basically their whole team. So were you surprised the Timberwolves were able to come back without Karl-Anthony Towns and beat a pretty good Clippers team?
I was surprised, honestly, but I felt as though the Timberwolves are just one of those young teams, man, that even when naturally, like a veteran team, if they lose their best player, you're going to see the effects on the veteran team. A lot of the benefit of young teams is that they don't know any better. They don't care. They're just like, hey, and the way the Timberwolves have taken on this persona of it's us against the world, which I see that a lot coming from the Patrick Beverley element of things. And you see them adopting that scrappiness that Patrick Beverley has now adopted, right? And I really wasn't surprised to see it, because the way they played the Clippers was very tough. They played with a lot of energy, and they play with a lot of like screw you energy. And so, Karl-Anthony Towns, I was honestly amazed when I saw him foul out. I was like, dude, what's this guy doing? I didn't know what was going on. But the Timberwolves are a good young team. And so, yeah, they definitely deserve the credit. The celebration, yeah, it got kind of crazy. But, I guess for a team that hasn't been to the playoffs in 18 years, I think it was, I guess I can see where the jubilation comes from. Even though, like, I saw on Twitter, I saw this one meme, and they said, this is the Timberwolves celebrating the championship. And it was like Kobe standing on the table when he got his 5th championship, holding the ball in the championship. And I was like, that's apt. That's an apt comparison.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, and there was another one too where Patrick Beverley is celebrating and everything, and they're showing him getting a medal or whatever, and then it realizes he's in third behind Devin Booker, and I think Ja Morant was the other one. It was pretty good. So, like I said, I was still impressed with how they came back, because I think at one time they were down by 7 or 8 points, and to come back without your star player, and you got guys like I said, Patrick Beverley, D'Angelo Russell's kind of been forgotten about, and then of course Anthony Edwards, who was really good last year, is still good. He's basically one of the future for the league, right? But I was still very impressed how they were able to come back. And the Clippers, they started going a little cold there in the fourth quarter, I noticed. But like I said, the Clippers, I didn't think they were going to go all that way, but I've been impressed by the Clippers too. Without Kawhi Leonard, half the season they didn't have Paul George, and they were still in that position. Do you think the Clippers, if they win on Friday night, which, at the time of this recording, it's Friday and the game's not done, but I think by the time this is done, the Clippers game will be over. If the Clippers can, if the Clippers can go out and beat the Pelicans, do you think there's a chance that Kawhi Leonard could come back and they could maybe upset the Suns?
Honestly, man, the news broke that Paul George wasn't playing. And so even with that, I'm very unexpecting of the Clippers to beat the Pelicans, to be honest with you. If they somehow did do it, I feel like they're just so careful with Kawhi Leonard, and Kawhi in and of himself. Remember, I mean, I think that's what initially started the beef with the Spurs, because the Spurs wanted to bring him back and he didn't feel like he was ready. And so unless it was something Kawhi was really pushing for, then maybe it could happen. But there has been no news about Kawhi, even regarding his progress. I think right when we had like the last week of the regular season, there was a few rumors coming around, but then people kind of deaded it real quick. So if it happened, I would honestly be shocked, but I don't expect Kawhi. I don't even think we're going to see Kawhi this year.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, because like I said, a week before the season was officially over, right? I think it was, yeah, like a week before or whatever. There was reports that Kawhi Leonard could maybe come back, right, and play in the play-in game, which we know that's not going to happen now. But there was a lot of talks where Kawhi Leonard was training and stuff like that, and he told everybody to, shut their cameras off and stuff like that, which I thought was interesting too. I know Kawhi doesn't like the media or whatever, but like, or is he does like he I just know he's pretty private about that stuff. So maybe
Yeah.
that was more of him just saying, I don't want any more rumors out there. But it was very interesting to see how it worked. But like, imagine if Kawhi Leonard came back and they took on the Suns, that would probably be a conference finals matchup, which it was last year, right? Even without
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard. So
Yeah.
I don't know, that would be such a good series if a healthy Kawhi Leonard versus the Suns or whatever. That'd be a great matchup. Of course, it's probably not going to happen, but I would just love to see it happen. So
We'd be blessed, man. Like imagine that,
yeah.
like 1-8 seed right off the bat. We're getting that matchup. That would be
Mm-hmm.
amazing. That was emblematic of last year when we got the Lakers and the Suns, and then Anthony Davis got hurt. So we all kind of know how that went, but it was emblematic of that
Mm-hmm.
same energy last year.
Yeah, it's similar to like say the Suns and Clippers play, right? Which I'm not sure exactly if they're going to win tonight, which I'm thinking they're going to end up losing without Paul George. But like, if they have a healthy Kawhi, like the Nets and Celtics, right? With Kevin Durant versus, Jason Tatum, and that's going to be a first round matchup, which most of the time that'd be a conference finals matchup, right?
Yeah.
So it is a little disappointing to see that, but we'll see what happens. I think the Suns eventually are going to probably go all the way and take on the Bucks, which I think is going to be the finals again. But actually, before we start talking about before we continue start talking about the playoffs, the big news was kind of the Lakers letting go Frank Vogel. They're not in the playoffs. What happened to the Lakers this year? And do you think it was more injuries than really anything?
I think it was a combination of a lot of things, to be honest with you. I think that obviously injuries played a huge part in it, with Anthony Davis not ever being healthy, guys like Kendrick Nunn struggling to be on the court, and so on. I think a lot of the injuries permeated through the roster. But I also think that you can kind of tell when a team is just playing hard basketball, right? Like I alluded to the Timberwolves earlier, and the Timberwolves in that game against the Clippers, when they in that game, they were playing their hearts out. They were playing so hard, and you can just tell teams that it's like, man, why are y'all trying so hard, man? It's like game 22 of the season, but that's the type of energy that team carries. The Lakers
Mm-hmm.
by no means carry that energy. And granted, they're not a young team. They're a veteran team, and they're a team that by all accounts would naturally have to win off their talent and just naturally have to be better than the other team and have to have a good framework and chemistry to be better than other teams. But when you're talking about now that type of team is riddled of injuries, you already were an old team, then you don't necessarily have a great fit where you have a guy like Russell Westbrook who is very ball dominant, and he has never really played a style of basketball outside of being on ball. Anytime Russell, like people can go back and watch tapes of this man since he was in Oklahoma City. Russell Westbrook has never really been able to play off the ball efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you pair that with LeBron James, who is predominantly on the ball and has played off ball in scattered moments, but LeBron is best with the ball in his hands, right? So now you're trying to mesh those two things together. And dude, I mean, I'm seeing moments during the season where LeBron's posting up in the post, and this is funny enough against the Timberwolves, and Patrick Beverly is not even. I mean, if you did this in NBA 2K, like it should be like an excellent shot, for example. Like that's as green as a shot, as good as a shot you're gonna get. Patrick Beverly was sagging so far off of Russell Westbrook. He was in LeBron's like lap while LeBron's getting guarded by another guy. Like that's how much he did not care about Russell Westbrook shooting the shot. And Russell Westbrook still passed the ball to LeBron, and it was a turnover. So when I saw that play, I was like, oh yeah, this season is just wash it down, just wash it down. And I think all those combination of factors, as well as I think where the Frank Vogel aspect comes into things, is that the defense never ever amounted to being a championship caliber defense, and Anthony Davis is a huge part of that. But when you're just seeing bad blown assignments left and right, at some point it's like, dude, are the players even listening to you anymore? And so you can see how the Frank Vogel aspect may play a part. Do I think he deserved to get fired? Maybe not. It just depends on if you still have the voice of your locker room. But yeah, I think it was just so many things that went wrong with the Lakers this season, honestly, that you could attribute them missing the playoffs to.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of factors that the reason why they didn't make the playoffs. Of course, injuries were a big problem. Like I said, Anthony Davis, the last 2 years, it seems like he hasn't been able to get fully healthy. He really hasn't been healthy since the time they won the championship, which was
Yeah.
2 years ago, which really feels like it was 5, 10 years ago. It's
Yeah.
crazy how things are different now. But
Yeah.
like, injuries were definitely a problem. But I think at the same time, they didn't build the way that the Lakers team was built this year. I don't think was a smart lineup because most of them were older already. So yeah, you have that experience, but like to bring in guys like Melo and to bring in guys like Trevor Ariza, they were already older. So like maybe 5 years ago, that team would be good, or 7, 8 years ago. But I mean, now it's just, and they didn't really have a lot of shooters either. And they did lose a lot of role players over the last few years. You get lost guys like Alex Caruso, KCP. You lost a lot of those guys, but I feel like they went for a more, older team. And I think in today's day, like I said, you got to have those young players. And I think it really hurt him. And of course, the injuries were a problem too. Like I said, LeBron is getting older. He's not getting any younger. He was still playing great, but the problem was he didn't really have a team around him this year. And
Yeah.
I think the trade for Russell Westbrook was just a bad experiment. I don't know who's going to want to trade for Russell Westbrook, but if you were the Lakers right now, would you trade Russell Westbrook or Anthony Davis or just both?
I would trade Russ. I still think you're in a position where, and I saw that the Pacers were interested in making a deal for Russell Westbrook, and it involved some like the likes of shedding the contracts of, I believe it was Buddy Hield and someone else. I don't remember the name of who else they were trying to shed in that deal, but who initially was supposed to be who the Lakers were going after in the first place. Funny enough, Buddy Hield. But I think that I would rather trade Russ because I still think with LeBron performing at this level, I don't think LeBron's at the stage where he was in obviously early Cleveland days or even Miami or the second stint in Cleveland where you could just give LeBron whatever and he can carry it to the playoffs. He's not in that stage anymore, but he is still great enough that he could be another core piece to a title contender. And if you got Anthony Davis who has to stay healthy, I mean, it's getting ridiculous how he gets hurt all the time. And it's like, granted, it's these little freak incidents that happen where he'll step on an ankle and get hurt. But it's like, dude, you're just always hurt. You know what I'm saying? And you're a
Mhm.
guy that's getting paid on a max contract. So I think that if you can keep those two and you build around a great defensive team with shooting on it, then because even the team that won the championship, they were not a great shooting team. But the great part about that team is that they were always one of the top defensive teams. So that's where it hurts to lose wings like Caruso, like you noted, or
Mhm.
KCP. And now you have to kind of go and find that again, as well as go get some shooters to space around these guys because this season is just a glowing example of LeBron just can't just carry a team and force a round peg or force a square thing into a round peg type deal. It's like it just can't work like that anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I think trading Russell Westbrook would be the smarter idea. I just don't know what team would be interested. I didn't realize when you mentioned the Pacers that they were interested in. That would be a great trade, right? If the Lakers could actually get Buddy Hield, a really good shooter, which they did not have last year, right? But
Yeah.
like I just don't know. Like I would trade Russell Westbrook too, but I'm just not sure what you could get for him. And if you could get someone like Buddy Hield, that would be great, right? But I just don't know if that would actually happen. But at one time Russell Westbrook was the best point guard in the league, but he's not even close to that anymore. And clearly his prime is way past him too. So we'll see what happens. Do you think, and we just kind of mentioned this recently, do you think Frank Vogel deserved all the blame that he got, or do you think that, he got kind of crucified there in LA?
He got crucified. I mean, he's the guy that took the brunt of the blame. The front office deserved blame. LeBron deserved blame. Anthony Davis deserved blame. Russell Westbrook deserved blame. Everybody had fair blame to share,
Mhm,
but definitely Frank Vogel is the guy that fell on the nail for this one. So
mhm.
that's without a doubt. That's how it went down for him.
It's interesting too because do you think Frank Vogel could get another job here soon? Because he did win a championship and he had a lot of success in Indiana, not so much in Orlando, but not a lot of people do have success there. But I mean, do you think he has another chance? Do you think he has a chance to get hired for next season?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Like you said, he's a championship coach. He's a guy that's shown he can handle superstars with
Hmm.
how he was able to coach that team to a championship, which is a big deal. And it goes understated, a coach that can actually coach superstars well. And I think that he everybody kind of sees that Frank Vogel's getting the raw end of the stick. It's not one of those situations where people are just like, this is a terrible coaching job from Frank. I think he will be able to get another job. If anything, I think this helps his experience. If him moving on from this Lakers job, I think it helps his ability to be able to get another job because people saw that what he was able to accomplish with this team.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. And I think right now there's only 2 openings, the Lakers and the Kings. I'm not sure. I kind of thought Detroit would be open, but it seems like right now they're going to keep Dwayne Casey. And I think there's a few other places that could have a coaching opportunity, but it would be interesting to see what happens with Vogel. But what do you think the Lakers now do at head coach? Because I heard some rumors that Quinn Snyder would leave the Jazz. I don't know why he would do that. There was even rumors that Doc Rivers could be going to LA, but I mean, who do you think would be the best? Who do you think would be the best option for the Lakers at head coach right now?
See, that this one's a tough one because a lot of the prospects that people are talking about are currently on coaching teams, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about the perfect prospect, you want to get someone who has experience, like I said, coaching superstars that's shown that they can, when a superstar talks, they can earn that respect from them, especially let alone somebody as a big name as LeBron James. And so that was part of the contention between him and David Blatt, right? Like a lot of people don't feel like LeBron bought into David Blatt. So ideally, you would have wanted it to be Jason Kidd, but Jason Kidd obviously went and took the job from the Mavericks. So now you're in a situation where you're looking at like guys like Lionel Hollins. People are bringing up another guy like Mark Jackson, possibly. There's been reports about LeBron being willing to have Mark Jackson and aspiring or appreciating a guy like Mark Jackson in that role. But it's kind of just a toss-up right now, honestly. I think the Lakers are waiting to see how a lot of these playoff situations turn out, because depending on how Philly does, you could see something a shakeup in Philly. But I don't know. First, I mean, not even a whole season of James Harden and Joel Embiid, and then they would fire Dark Rivers. I don't know, man. That's a tough stretch for me to see that. But maybe one of these other situations somebody could free up something. I mean, who knows? You just never know unless somebody's contract is expiring and it could be the next coach of the Lakers.
Yeah. And this seems really crazy, but he just recently retired. But do you think a guy like Coach K would come out of retirement and coach the Lakers, right? He's had experience coaching LeBron, right, in the Olympics, I think in 08, 12, and 16. But do you think there's ever a chance that Mike Krzyzewski could leave and actually go to the NBA and coach the Lakers?
No chance. There is no chance in hell. I don't see any way Mike Krzyzewski would leave. I mean, he had the perfect gig. He was with Duke. He's with probably the most storied franchise or collegiate program in college sports. And he pretty much, there's nothing Mike Krzyzewski could do wrong there. I mean, the dude is pretty much a god in that region. So now you're going to go to LA and possibly impair what your coaching legacy has been. I don't see it. There's no shot. I don't. And dealing with NBA players is so much more of a headache than college kids. So yeah, I don't see it.
It was kind of a toss-up, but I was kind of wondering too, because no one's really talked about it much. And I know Coach K said Mike Krzyzewski said he was done coaching, college basketball, right? But he never said anything about coaching pro basketball, right? But he did retire from Team Olympics, so that would probably a good indication that he's not coaching. So
yeah.
And let's go back to the playoffs. Let's go back to the playoffs. What team do you think the Grizzlies can actually threaten the Suns? Because right now it seems like the Grizzlies and Suns are going to take on each other in the conference finals as of now, right? But do you think the Grizzlies have a chance to knock off the Suns?
I think the Grizzlies are a really good team, man. I personally do not trust them. I think that they're a young team. They're really good. They remind me of the Jazz about a year or two ago, and they have that same Jazz energy, a young team with a really talented young guard and good pieces around them. You know what I mean? And solid coaching as well. But in terms of playing a team like the Suns, man, the Suns just have it all. And I don't think the Grizzlies have that. For one, the Suns have the two options that you need to go to, whether you need to go to your facilitator, Chris Paul can go and get you buckets. Then you can go to a guy like Devin Booker, and Devin Booker can also go and create something and get you points on the board and be your option down the stretch. The Grizzlies, a lot of everything, they play great team basketball, obviously, which is evident when Ja Morant has been out. But now when you look at the playoffs, it's a entirely different ball game, man. And when you can win these games without your star player in the regular season, but things change up so much in the postseason. It's almost a different brand of basketball, especially with the level of preparation guys have. And when you're playing a guy as smart as Chris Paul, as a coach as good as Monty Williams, it's definitely a high fight. I think even in the first round, they're going to have their hands filled with the Timberwolves. And then if they get out of that series, I think if they got out of that series, I think they would play whoever was the 3 or the 4 seed. And so, granted, if they win their matchup, so I think that, and if that was the case, then they would end up playing a team like Golden State, right? So if you played Golden State, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah.
So I think the Grizzlies, I think they're a young team that had a really good regular season, but I don't see them knocking off like a team like the Suns or Golden State if Steph is healthy. I just don't see it.
And you just mentioned Ja Morant came back from injury, and he was out for a few games there. Do you think he'll be able to replicate what he did in the regular season to the postseason? Because, like you said, he was an MVP candidate at one time. But do you think he'll be able to replicate that success coming off of an injury and playing in, I think, well, last year he played in the postseason, but in this year's postseason?
I think he is a big game player. Ja Morant's one of those guys that he lives up to the moment. He plays big in the big spots and whatnot. And then I think last postseason is actually what made me realize, oh, he's going into that. Remember that even we had the same thing happen with Donovan Mitchell. It was like last year or 2 years ago where they played the Nuggets. It was 2 years ago. And remember, every game Donovan Mitchell's dropping like high 30s, 40-point games, whatever the case might be. Him and Jamal Murray are going back and forth. And I feel like Ja Morant had a similar experience last year, and now is coming into realizing his own moment and being able to dominate the game in his own way. I just question who else, right? That's the biggest question for me when it comes to the Grizzlies. I literally just stamp the team and say, who else?
Yeah, exactly. And I think too with Morant, and actually, where would you rank Morant in the top like premier point guards? Do you think he's a top 5 point guard? Do you think he's a top 10? Where do you put Ja Morant in the top for the top point guards?
That's tough. That's tough because you give credit to where credit is due for his performance this year, obviously, but there's so many point guards in the league, man, and you don't want to just forget a guy like Damian Lillard who's hurt this year. Obviously, you got Steph, you got Chris Paul, you got guys like Kyrie Irving, you got, I don't know what people consider James Harden. You got, I mean, there's Ben Simmons. I don't know what you consider Ben Simmons. Is Luka a point guard? I don't know, but you just got so many great point guards in the NBA right now. I don't even know where I would put Ja, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there's just so many point guards. Like the NBA has a wealth, a talent of just point guards. Like there, you could probably name 15 or 16 really good point guards, and that's half the teams in the league, right? Because like you said, of course, you got Damian Lillard, who was hurt most this year. Then you got Steph Curry. Now you got Ja Morant. I mean, Luka technically, I think, is a point guard. I consider James Harden more of a shooting guard, but some people consider him. You got Kyrie Irving. Then you got guys like coming up like LaMelo Ball, you got Trae Young. And I mean, there's so many good point guards out there. And like I said, Darius Garland's another one too from Cleveland. So
yeah.
And there's a lot of DeJounte Murray. I mean, you could go all day naming top point guards, but yeah, I consider Morant, I think, the 5th best point guard in the league, but that might be a bit of a stretch. But I just with his performance this year, I definitely think that should be somewhere in there. I think he's going to make the All NBA team. I'm not sure where, the 1st or 2nd, because he did miss a decent amount of games. But we'll see what happens with Memphis. And do you think Phoenix, or actually, let's talk about Golden State for a little bit. I think Steph Curry is going to be playing, right? But do you think Golden State has a chance to knock off Phoenix?
Yeah, without a doubt. If Golden State is fully healthy, dude, I think Golden State, they were threatening Phoenix at one point for the top seed, but then that's when Draymond got hurt. And when Draymond got hurt, then they were playing, they went on a slide there, and then Steph gets hurt. And so I think definitely the Warriors are a team that Phoenix is looking at saying, hey, these guys, I mean, we know what it is. They're in the same division. They're definitely a conference rival. So I think the Warriors and Suns, that's definitely a 7-game series that could go either way.
Yeah, like I said, like especially if Steph could come fully healthy, I could see them giving the Suns a lot of fits. But man, just with how good the Suns were this year, and I think they definitely want vengeance. They definitely want to get back to the finals because again, they had a 2-0 series lead against the Bucks, and they let it. They let the Bucks win, or not? They didn't let them win, but the Bucks came back and won 4 straight, right? So I think they really want that title so much. So I just can't really see Golden State beating them, but. again, we got a whole playoffs. I mean, anything can happen in the playoffs. That's why it's so fun, right? But
Yeah.
I just can't see anybody knocking off Phoenix or Milwaukee in that case. And on the East side, do you think anybody can take down? Well, I guess the Heat are the number 1 seed, but who do you think is the best, or what team do you think will represent the Eastern Conference at the finals for the East?
Oh man, this is a tough one too. Honestly, I think is like you noted, I think the Bucks have a really good chance at it again
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that just that continuity, that chemistry. I think that the Bucks have a really good chance at it. The Nets are just such a wild card, man. I
Mm-hmm.
can't stretch enough how much they're a wild card because I mean, we saw what kind of damage Kevin Durant almost did against the Bucks last year, right? Without having a Kyrie Irving, without a Steph Curry, without all these other pieces. Now he has those pieces and Ben Simmons, right? So the Nets are just a wild card. I think if the Nets are performing at optimum capacity, I think you see the Nets there. If not, I think that I think we could get the Bucks going back again because as much as I like the Joel Embiid and James Harden pairing, it's been evident that you can see that they're still figuring things out a lot of times throughout games. And it's tough sometimes where because I mean, a lot of people have been wanting James Harden to be the MVP James Harden from what 2 years ago, right? When he went like he was averaging almost 35 or whatever amount of points. So I think he doesn't need to be that Harden anymore, but I think that they do have limitations on Philly that I don't see with the Nets or the Bucks. So I think those would be my two teams that I would definitely have vying for that Eastern Conference champion title.
Yeah, I like the Sixers a lot too, but I mean, they have a lot of baggage. And of course, James Harden always seems to struggle in the postseason, and Joel Embiid really hasn't gone that far yet in the playoffs. And Doc Rivers has a history of being one of the top teams in the league, right? When when this regular season comes, but when the playoffs happen, like he always seems to really struggle. So that's why I'm a little afraid of the Sixers. And I like the Heat a lot too, but I don't think they'll have enough to take down the Bucks, right? And the same thing with the Nets. I think the Nets are a scary team as well. For them to be a 7 seed is just crazy, as we mentioned earlier. And of course, the Celtics too. I mean, they're just hot right now with Jason Tatum. We keep on mentioning them, but like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they've been great after the All-Star break. So
Yeah.
but I just can't. At the end of the day, I think the Bucks are the best team, and again, they have that continuity. They have the experience. I mean, before last year, the Bucks lost in the playoffs a lot, and they finally got over it. And it's going to be hard for anybody to take them. So I just can't see anybody beating Milwaukee in the East, and I think we're going to see another Milwaukee and Phoenix matchup. But we'll see what happens toward the end there. And another thing that happened recently too is Luka Doncic, I think, is officially out for the Saturday for their game 1. I think it's on Saturday. But do you think the Mavericks can still win without Luka?
Man, it's yeah. I mean, it's the NBA. Everybody's so talented and skilled. Everybody can win a game technically, but I mean, I guess this is technically their best game to try and win because they're not watching. They don't have like all this film on you in the series yet to
Mm-hmm.
watch. So I think that this is technically the best game they could try and steal, but I think it's going to be tough, man. I mean, the Mavericks just do so much that revolves around Luka.
Yeah.
To now remove that variable, it's tough, man. I think that it's going to be a tough fight for them, but they can, but I don't know if they win game 1 without him.
Well, and there's a good chance too that he could be out for a while. And like I said, if the Mavs are out with or without Luka for more than one game, I can't see them winning. I think they're matching up with Denver, right? Because they're the 3 seed and Denver's the 6. So I think there's a chance that Denver could win that series. Again, the Jokic is playing like an MVP again this season. But without Luka, it's going to be really hard for the Mavericks to win because he's pretty much their whole team. And like, I just can't see them winning without Luka. Really, I mean, they might maybe win 1 or 2 games, but I can't see them winning without Luka. And speaking of Jokic, who do you think is the MVP right now? Is it Embiid or Jokic? Or I mean, who do you think the MVP is right now?
I think honestly, man, I think Devin Booker should get it. Who do I know will probably get it? I know probably Nikola Jokic will probably repeat as MVP unless the voters all of a sudden get swayed by the fact that Joel Embiid won the scoring title.
Mm-hmm.
I'm most likely betting, if I had to bet money on it, I'm pretty much going to vote Jokic. I think that the narrative of him playing without his 2 best players on his behind
Mm-hmm.
him with Jamal Murray being out and Michael Porter Jr. I think that definitely plays into his narrative. And I mean, he had a great season from a statistical standpoint. It's evident that the Mavericks, or sorry, not the Mavericks, the Nuggets would not be in this position. They're currently, as I see it, they are the 6th seed. So I think they're slated, because I think Golden State's currently the 3rd seed right now. So I think they would play Golden State as it sits right now. But I think that them even being in that 6th spot is a testament to what Jokic has been able to pull off this year. And I mean, everything. And it's one of those seasons that he's having a great year across the board. He's not using, he doesn't have one of the highest usage rates of all time, like we've seen with other MVP guys in the past, where they had to use a historical amount of possessions to get their stats. No, he's just doing it within the flow of the offense, and the guy's unstoppable. So I could definitely see it most likely going towards Jokic.
Yeah, I think Jokic is having a great season as well, but I just think that Embiid should win it, because he should have won it last year, but he missed 20 games, so he wasn't able to win it. And Jokic, it's not like a knock on Jokic, right? I mean, he's still really good, right? But I just think that Embiid has had such a good season. I know he kind of cooled off toward the end, but I just, like I said, if I had a vote, which I don't, and of course, I think I would vote Embiid. Like, I think Embiid should win the MVP. Not sure if he will. I think there's a good chance that Jokic will win it. I kind of forgot to put Devin Booker in there, because he's been having a great season as well. So, but I think Embiid should win it. I don't think he will, but I think he deserves the MVP, right? So we'll see what happens, because I don't think they vote until they get in the conference finals. But I just think that Embiid should win it. He's had a great season all year. He should have won it last year, but we'll see what happens there. And is there anything else you want to mention before we end the show here?
I guess just on the topic of MVPs, the MVP is one of the most, it's one of the most consistent, inconsistent awards that the NBA has. There's no consistency to the criteria. There's no streamlined process as to like the fact that we don't know who's most likely going to win the MVP is a testament to, I mean, granted, this season's been unlike others. Like years past, most recently, we could say, oh, Giannis was going to win it, right? Like the 2 years ago, I believe Giannis won it. The year before that, Giannis won it. And so the Bucks were like leaps and bounds ahead of everybody. And Giannis had like just incredible stats across the board. And he won Defensive Player of the Year one of those years. But you look at the MVP process. I mean, this year, Devin Booker's team is leaps and bounds better than everybody else. But Devin Booker is not even a top 3 candidate. And so you look at that and you're like, okay, well, you look at Devin Booker's numbers. His numbers are not anywhere close to Jokic's, Giannis's, Embiid's. But then you look at, I guess, where you can the knock against Devin Booker is that his team is so good, but that's never really been a knock against other MVPs in the past, right? Like Steph, we all knew Steph was getting it the year they went 73-9, but you don't go 73-9 unless your team is really that good, right? You don't win a lot of games unless your team is that great, aside from maybe like Derrick Rose's Bulls, LeBron's first 7-year Cavaliers, those type of teams, maybe where it's obvious that the team is only good because of this one player. And like, similar thing with the Warriors, that was the case. They were that good because of Steph, but you just don't 73-9. It's like everybody's playing a huge role to get to that record. So the MVP has just been such a toss up on it. I guess I made a video on it because I just this topic always gets me, because I just heard the conversations going and I was like, man, they're not even mentioning Devin Booker. And I just couldn't, because I mean, this season, Devin Booker's season this year, you can go and compare it to Kobe's seasons. And Kobe's had seasons emblematic of this where Kobe won an MVP. So it's like, okay, all right. But, I digress.
Yeah. It's kind of funny too, because, Devin Booker had the Suns had the best record this year, right? And Devin Booker's their best player. And yet not a lot of people are talking about him as much as they'd be talking about like Embiid or Jokic, right? And even Charles Barkley, I think, mentioned this too. Usually the team with the best record, it's going to go to their star player, right? And because Giannis won the MVP back-to-back years and they had the best record back-to-back years. So, and same thing, I think James Harden's, the Rockets had the best record at one time when he won the league MVP. Now the Thunder were a little different when Westbrook won it. But again, when Steph Curry had 2 straight MVPs, both times they had the best record. So normally it goes to the star player of the team who has the best record. But with this year, there's been a lot more, I don't know, I guess Devin Booker, there's just been a lot more competition, right? With all the good players like Jokic and Embiid. And like I said, Devin Booker deserves to be in there. But I think with, Jokic, Embiid, and of course Giannis, they have to be with their stats as well. So we'll see what happens. But again, go check out Brendan's video there. I should put it in the description down below. But again, actually, before we end, I forgot to mention this. Not a lot of people are talking about this award, but who do you have winning Rookie of the Year?
Oh man, Rookie of the Year is such a man. This is a controversy in and of itself, man. I think I saw like on the other day, like there was a controversy on Twitter about Bill Simmons, and I guess he said F Jalen Green or something like that because of the fact that he feels like Jalen Green is a guy that's just putting up stats. But I mean, I think a guy like Jalen Green, funny enough, is a viable candidate, right? Because even though, granted, you could say he's just putting up stats or whatever the case might be, I think that when you're looking at how he's able to perform, and when you're a rookie, your team is just not going to win games, man. Like it happens sometimes. Like last year, LaMelo's team was in the running, right? They were within that play-in striking distance, and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, LaMelo gets it over Anthony Edwards. And then I think people were looking at Herb Jones as well this year. A lot of people like Herb Jones, but I think that I want to reward a guy like Jalen Green who can hit the ground running and show that he is a great player right from the onset and can be an impact player from the onset. Granted, his team didn't win a lot of games, but that's not necessarily what you're supposed to do your rookie year. Normally your rookie year, you're supposed to come in, learn the game, and then if you're already making an impact in a way of showing that, hey, I can actually perform at a higher level. Now the next year is how do I bring my teammates along to do the same thing and improve our team performance? So I think a guy like Jalen Green's an actual viable candidate for it.
Yeah, I mean, the Rockets just aren't very good, right? And Jalen Green has had a great season, but in my opinion, I think I would probably vote Evan Mobley. He's been really good this year. He's been stable. I mean, his team has a chance to make the playoffs. So I like Mobley. Cade Cunningham came on toward the end of the season, right? And there was a few other players too. You mentioned Herb Jones, but I think I would give it probably to Evan Mobley if the season is done, but I would probably give it to Evan Mobley.
I respect that. Yeah.
But there's some other guys that could win it, but I just think Mobley's had the most consistent season. And I think a lot of people didn't even have him winning Rookie of the Year. I think a lot of predictions were Jalen Green, or a lot of predictions. Some were even Jalen Suggs. He hasn't had that season, but you know, I just, if I had a vote or whatever, I would give it to Evan Mobley. So again, is there anything else you want to talk about before we end the interview here?
Oh man, I'm good, man. Got a good amount of NBA topics, and you always love talking to NBA. So yeah, I'm good on my front, man.
All right. Again, don't forget to check out Brendan's YouTube channel and podcast, KBR Sports. And again, thanks for coming on, Brendan. Have a wonderful night. Enjoy the rest of the playoffs.
All right, you too, man.